Please welcome Ann Wojcicki, CEO and co-founder of 23andMe, who will be interviewed by CNBC reporter Chrissy Farr.
I just took a DNA test, turns out I'm 100% dead. Even when I'm crying crazy, yeah, I got boy problems, that's the human in me. Bling bling, then I solve them, that's the goddess in me. You could've had a bad, not committal. Help you with your career, just a little. You supposed to hold me down, but you holding me.
Hey everybody, I am Chrissy Farr from CNBC. I'm a healthcare and technology reporter, and I'm here with Ann Wojcicki from 23andMe, who we're excited to talk to you guys about genomics. Are we the only genomics panel at HLTH? So I think we might be. Yeah. Okay, so we gotta own this topic.
We will.
So you've had quite the year. I mean, everything from the Golden State Killer, which was just a massive news story, to on the personal front, you just had a baby.
I did.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So talk to me about this year that you've had, and looking back at this, kind of what is your perspective now on the industry and how 23andMe fits in?
I think I think the Golden State Killer is again, it's raised a lot of the privacy concerns I think that people have had, and it's an interesting example of something that we premeditated, like back in the early days of the company. It's actually part of one of the things that we disclosed. This could happen one day. And so it's interesting to see it's actually happening now. So privacy is definitely one of those things that I think has become a hot topic for not just companies like 23andMe in the health sector, but also the tech world, and companies like Facebook and Google, and there's a bunch of New York Times articles today even about like, how is my data actually being used, and was it really consented in the right kind of way? So that's definitely a hot topic that I think 23andMe really wants to be on top of. I think other things that happen with the company is we always said, when I look around the booths that we have here and I think about, what is going to define success for those companies, the hardest thing for all of us is getting scale. Like, there's a lot of great ideas out there in those booths, but it's really hard to get eyeballs and it's hard to get scale. So when I think about the first 11 years of 23andMe, it was really about building out the infrastructure of scale. So we have over 10 million customers, over 80% of them have consented for research. I now feel like I have enough of a scale for the company that we could actually try to make significant changes for our customers and in healthcare. And if I think about our mission, the mission statement of the company is helping people access, understand, and benefit from the human genome. And the first decade was really about access and understand the human genome. And I look at now, how is it that we are actually going to help all of our customers benefit from the human genome? And you can't really benefit without scale.
So, you brought up privacy, which I think is, just a massive topic for the company. And, whenever I talk about 23andMe, inevitably somebody will hit back and say, this is a company that is selling my data to pharma. Mm-hmm. So do you feel like your customers really understand what is happening to their information when they're using a service like 23andMe, and is that still an education that you see needing to happen?
It's a huge priority for us to make sure that our customers, when they opt in, and I should emphasize that word opt in, our customers are opting into research or whatever, if they're taking a survey or if they're opting into research or individual level consent, it's a choice. And so we really want our customers to actually pause and read it. And we've worked with the IRB to make sure that this is actually something that is understandable for people. So we really try hard. And I think for those of you who are customers, you can see it's not necessarily the easiest sign-in process, or even to buy the kit. It takes time. And any normal tech company would say, this is too onerous, like this is things we need to change. But we've always felt that it was really important for customers to understand exactly what they are getting, and the opt-in process. So more often than not, what our customers ask is they actually want to see a difference in healthcare. And I think, again, we're at a health meeting here. Health is like the universal bond between all of us, that we're all really frustrated with it. And people can relate. Like, if you have a family member who's sick or something, like, we all want to help. And so part of opting into research is this idea that you can do something. And I think one thing, when I've surveyed my customers and I talk to people, and again, even when I worked at places like NCI, there's nothing more disheartening than knowing you have a terminal illness and you consented for research and your sample is sitting in the lab and no one's doing anything. So more often than not, our customers were coming to us and saying, just do something, like make progress. And especially for people who have a terminal illness, they want to know, is there something that can happen that's going to benefit them? Or is there something that we can do that's going to help benefit their children? And so that's the lens that we're always thinking about this, is like, what is it that we can do? And we have on the top of, every time you're taking a survey, it says on the top, are you opted in or are you not in research? And it always gives you the opportunity to opt out. And I think it's a really key component of 23andMe that's very different than a lot of academic research, is that you have that ability at any point in time to say, I no longer want to be participating.
So I may be one of the few folks out there that has read the terms and conditions for 23andMe. I don't think most people do for almost anything, and that's totally fair, right? And one of the things that you guys actually say is that you could potentially find out quite shocking and life-changing things if you get a 23andMe test. And just in talking to people at this conference, people have come up and said, I found out, this crazy story about my father isn't my father. I've got this family member I never knew I had. So what do you think about those sorts of stories? I mean, you must hear them all the time.
It's where I actually say, like, people come up to us in those early days, people would come up to us and say, like, they're like angry, like, I'm never going to do your test for this reason and that reason. I'd be like, that's great. Like, don't do it. It's not for everybody. And the reality is that you do learn things. Like, there's things in your DNA, whether it's on the health side or the ancestry side or family relationships, that might tell a different story than what you perceive of yourself. And so it's really important for us that our customers actually pause when they buy the product, or when they're thinking about, like, am I opting in to Relative Finder or DNA Relatives? Like, they pause and understand that, yes, they might learn something that is surprising for them. So we actually, because we have so many of these stories now about people finding out that they, were children, like their father is not their father, they're a child of a sperm donor, that they have siblings they didn't know about, we actually did launch a resources page for our customers about how to handle this. Because we have, it's ironic, because of the FDA issues, we spent a lot of time focusing on the health side, but what I actually see is that the ancestry side in some ways is more life-changing for people, because it really changes their sense of identity.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious, just have you ever tried to quantify, say, the percentage of people that are finding out, particularly a paternity surprise, the father isn't the father?
We don't know stats on every single one of our customers about, whether or not they're their family, but we have thousands of customer stories. And in some ways it's, we have somebody who just collects stories every single day, and she's like, there's once a day where I sit back and I just say, holy cow, like, that's an amazing story. And, the reality is humans are really interesting. And there's all kinds, I always joke, I was like, people are really interesting and people also like sex. So there's consequences to that. And there's all kinds of interesting stories that have come out of it. So it's important for us that our customers are aware when they are buying and when they're actually consenting into it, and that they think about it. But it does really change people. And oftentimes, like, again, we get some amazing stories of people. I'm actually one of the customers who's found a story. Like, I found a first cousin. It turns out that my uncle had a child he didn't know about. And so, like, this, poor guy who's now a very close family friend, thought he had no siblings, and now he has a lot of Wojcickis. Like, there's a lot of us.
It's an interesting family to find.
It's interesting to bump in, yeah. But, it's been a lovely experience. And I think that's part of my hope here, is with services like DNA Relatives and with the, ancestry composition, is it actually brings humanity closer together. And that people start to find relationships that they never knew about before, and that people realize, like, I had a perception of myself as being 100% something, and then I realize I actually have DNA from all over the world, and I'm connected to all these people.
So you guys as a company have sort of wavered back and forth over the years on whether you will stick to genotyping, which is what you offer today, or get into more of a whole genome sequencing product, which would be a lot more expensive. But in theory, you could find out a lot more about a person's health based on that richer and deeper sequence. So where are you with that discussion now, to sequence or not to sequence?
So sequencing is like the fancy toy that a lot of people talk about, and I think there's a place in the healthcare market for sequencing. The reality is that it's 1 to 5% of customers find out that they have some kind of mutation. So for like a direct-to-consumer product, that's not necessarily a very exciting experience for customers if 1 to 5%, let's say, are going to find something out. And also, I think there's a question is like, what's that right place? I think that's potentially, there's still the issue of variants of unknown significance. Exactly how do you follow up on some of these mutations? So we've stuck to the genotyping platform in part because we see that, the price point for customers is in the genotyping affordability. Like customers really are between that $100 and $200 kind of price point.
And a sequencing product could be $700. A
sequencing product is, to do it well, a sequencing product can be much more expensive. It's certainly north of $500. So I think that there's two things. Like one, there's a price component, and I think there's a question about, customers aren't necessarily running out to say, I want to know if I'm part of that 1 to 5% of some kind of deleterious mutation. And so I think there's a question of like, how big is that market right now that customers actually really want to find out? And then secondly, is that price point actually something that people actually want to tap into? So 23andMe, we've stayed in the genotyping space because we find it actually hits a broad number of our customers, like the interest of what our customers are looking for. Like customers want to know about things like our type 2 diabetes report or an Alzheimer's report. We're very comprehensive on carrier status. So we hit a broad amount of mutations that are more frequent in the population. Even the BRCA, the BRCA mutations, which covers they're the common mutations in the Ashkenazi population. So sequencing is definitely going to be more relevant for somebody who has a family history of something where they really want to go and do an in-depth analysis. But in some ways, that's a very different experience than what 23andMe is trying to cultivate.
So on the health front specifically now, because you've been increasingly adding more and more of these health reports as the FDA has been approving them, and one of them is diabetes. So let's talk about the idea of this polygenic risk score, and how much do you see that driving the business and just sales of DNA tests in the future, especially when we've seen a slowdown in the past year?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think all the rage right now is the polygenic risk scores, is being able to say I'm going to look at thousands of genetic mutations or millions of genetic mutations and calculate a risk score about a certain disease. So we launched one recently on type 2 diabetes where we look at hundreds of mutations and we say this is the score for individuals. Roughly here's the 20% of our customers who we say are genetically higher risk for type 2 diabetes. So it's definitely, I think, the trend more and more where people are looking at the research side, and it goes back to my first point in terms of scale. What's important that 23andMe has built is that we have 10 million individuals, the consent rate is over 80%. We have this opportunity to make discoveries that we then give back to our customers. And so we're looking at what are the next disease areas that we would go and do research on so that we could generate those reports back for customers. I think that there has been a slowdown in the market, and I would say there's no one report that goes and people are buying for one specific type of report. People want an overall experience, and they want fun, they want to discover about themselves, and they want some of the health side. So I think there has been a market slowdown, and I think that there's potentially all kinds of reasons why, and I think I'd actually
love to know what your theories are on.
I think people are wary of tech these days.
So is it the Facebook effect that is trickling over to healthcare?
I think it's hard to really know, but I would think that it's a Facebook effect. That I think people are just more wary about what's going online and how is the information being used. And I think that, frankly, all of the companies out there, then we have a responsibility to really work with our customers about how are you using our information? And I look at, there was an interesting article in the New York Times today even about some fertility apps that were giving recommendations back. And it's interesting, like, have those companies, like, is there actually a consent process? Is there a research protocol? Like, how are some of these companies actually using the information? And I think it's really important that companies are transparent about it. And it's one of the things I think that's been a hallmark of 23andMe is that we've really tried from day one to be transparent with our data security in terms of like breaches and how we're protecting data in that way, as well as how we're honoring your privacy choices with research.
So on the polygenic score specifically, so for a condition like diabetes, which a lot of people are at risk for, it's very common, type 2 diabetes. So how do you think about communicating levels of risk back to your consumer base? Do you think about telling people that they're at lower risk, or is that an unsafe thing to communicate, given that people's behavior could change at any moment, and that could change, that you could become higher risk? Mm-hmm. So how do you think about that when you're talking about such a common
I think
ailment?
We try to make sure that we're, like, more and more, I think the future of where we're going to go is being able to take into consideration, your diet, your exercise, your lifestyle, all of these. And so your score hopefully will evolve over time as you actually get more and more information that's coming into it. So we want to give people that perspective is like, listen, you might be genetically low risk for type 2 diabetes, but the way you live puts you at higher risk. So I think that's the future more and more of where everything is going to go, is that you say, the whole reason why I always loved genetics was because you get something that's fixed, but then you have this beautiful opportunity of changing with your environment. And so combining the genetic risks plus your environment will give you a really interesting perspective on how you're living your life and what are you really at risk for, what have you successfully managed those risks. We say in the company all the time, you want to change what you can and manage what you can't. And so, change, if I know I'm genetically higher risk for type 2 diabetes and I can change my diet and exercise, like, I can eventually have an impact on my outcomes. There's certain conditions like BRCA, like, it's hard to, that might be more medically managed, but we want to encourage our customers more and more to change what they can. And what's been great is we have started to do these surveys of our customers about how many of them are actually taking that next step. And we see that over 70% of our customers are specifically changing their lifestyle based on the information that they've learned. So they're trying to either change the diet and exercise, they're following up with physicians, but they're looking specifically to make change.
So speaking of combining different data sets, I'd love to know when I can get genetic information on my phone, because a lot of people have a version of Apple Health where they can already incorporate their wearables information, their sleep, and so on. So why not genetic?
We do. We have our app.
Okay.
So we have the app. So you can download the 23andMe app. Mm-hmm. You have the ability right now. We have partnerships with Apple. We are pulling in data right now with Human API. So the challenge for customers, and again, it's one of the things I push on for all entrepreneurs here, is like, customers want something interesting back. So like, it's interesting to pull your medical record, but like, what are you gonna, like, just looking at your, lab results is not terribly compelling. So like, what is it that you can give people back? And so that's where we're spending a lot of time thinking about what is it with your genetic information, what is the information that we can potentially pull, and then what are some of those interesting insights we can actually give you back. And so that's where we have an early version of something that we call Action Plan, which is really based on, some of the information you've told us about you, your genetic information, and your age, and what are those specific, actions that you should be taking every year for your health.
So to another part of your business, which is therapeutics, I mean, now 23andMe is increasingly valued as a therapeutics company. But we haven't seen anything much from the company publicly in terms of what are some of the early targets that you're looking at, and can this thesis be borne out around this idea that this database that you've collected could be potentially beneficial and moving you through that process more quickly. So can you give us an update on just how that therapeutics group is doing?
The therapeutics business should teach everyone patience, because it's, the reality of drug discovery is it takes a long time. And we start from the analysis, the data, and we look at all of these genetic variants. We come up with hypotheses. We do a tremendous amount of follow-up. So we have a number of programs in early stage research and late stage research. We did a large collaboration last year with GSK. We have six programs in development now with GSK. We have a number that we've kept on our own. So it's exciting. Like, I'm super excited about where it's going. We haven't been terribly public about it, in part because we understand, like, one, it takes a long time, and two, the reality of drug discovery is that there's a large number of failures. And so we want to set the expectations correctly when we know that we have things that are going to move into humans. So we're hopeful that there'll be something moving into humans soon. But I'm excited about the program. And I think that's, again, when I think about the mission of the company, about helping people access, understand, and benefit from the human genome, there's no better way to benefit from the human genome than to potentially have a cure that's based on genetics.
Well, thank you. We're just about out of time, but
Great.
I really appreciate the discussion.
Thank you.
I think our plan was to do a selfie. Are we still doing that?
Oh, yeah, let's do a selfie.
Should
we do one of the audience?
Yeah, we want one with everybody else. All right. Cool. Thanks
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.